Howdy folks, Doc here with Last Best Tool, and this is part 2 of my kind of vehicle survival kit. This isn't usually the stuff that that most people have in their car, you know, their average car, but I'm suggesting a handful of things here that maybe you haven't thought of, and some uses for them, and this is for extreme weather driving. And lately we seem to have a lot of that around here. There's been many closures and avalanches, lots of people stuck sometimes, you know, for many hours, if not days. There's definitely a reason to be prepared. You're on your own in a lot of cases. And with what happened in Pakistan with, you know, where we saw people get stranded literally and dying, you know, I guess we know that can certainly happen. And you're on your own in most cases for at least a while. So first of all, you know, obviously your vehicle is like the world's best tent. You know, it's well insulated. It should be windproof. It's reasonably comfortable. So if you can stay in it till things clear up enough to be safe to you know, get rescued or, you know, explore or whatever, that's a good thing. So you have to be able to stay in your car. Well, that involves a few things. And it also, when it's time to be rescued, you know, or trying to get yourself out, self-rescue, there are things to think about. So I'm just going to go through this. It's kind of random at the moment, but I set a bunch of the items out that I carry, and also here's some wisdom just over the years of you know, driving, high-risk driving. Anyway, so first of all, I'm assuming you've got food and water. And water is generally the most that you need, you know, absolutely need. You can go quite a while without food, but the food is also heat energy. Get things that can freeze and that can stay in a car for quite a while. You know, they don't go bad. If you're thinking like granola bars or something like that, we'll also look at what's in the granola bars, because you can have those things too. You can have dried fruit, you can have nuts, you can have jerkies, or, you know, this is bison meat here, and just have a handful of different things. You can have hard candies, you know, although there's not much nutrition in those. Anyway, just have a selection of things that can be rock solid frozen and you can still consume it. It can stand the heat, maybe if you live in a warmer area. You know, and I like the sealed stuff in case it gets wet. You know, a loaf of bread, if the bag gets punctured and water gets in, you probably aren't going to eat it. But anyway, and water, well, obviously there are lots of different ways to carry water. In the cold, water can freeze. So sometimes the metal bottles, they actually blow out and kind of expand. You can get plastic bottles, but a couple of solutions that I use, one of them is called a dromedary bag, and here's one. And what these are basically like bladders, kind of like what you'd have in a kind of like a Camelback, except these are much more durable, heavy duty, and they can stretch a little bit. You don't fill things full, and in fact, here's some just to show you. I also use these kinds of bags here. Nalgene makes them. It has a standard Nalgene top. Here's a Rotopax, and you'll notice on these things, it's got the freeze line, so you can literally have this thing frozen solid with water. So I could fill this up, leave it in the car. If it freezes, you know, I'm obviously not going to drink it, but I can certainly have water until it does. You don't want to go over that, because that's when you can compromise the container. And I've got 1 and 2 gallon versions of these things. Another thing is you can take your insulated bottles, if you're headed out, and literally fill them with hot water and then seal them up. Now, you might need some pry bar to get in here and open this, because the water is going to depressurize a little bit, suction, and this might be really hard to open, you know, as it cools. It's not going to stay the same pressure inside. Once that happens, you know, sometimes you have to, you know, really work at getting these open. But if it starts out hot and these things keep water hot for a long time, you might actually have drinkable water in a couple of days. So start out with hot water. You're not going to drink it right away, but it's a backup solution. Get this stuff out of the way while it's here. What do you put it in? Grab old bags. This is a old Burton shoulder computer bag, pretty thick. It's got all kinds of places to put stuff. This would be fine. For the clothing that I'll talk about, I actually have a big fish pond dry bag here. And this dry bag, I can actually roll up and seal. It also works as a flotation device, somewhat, but it's basically a big heavy-duty bag, so I'll put all kinds of extra clothes in this, seal it up. Another one I use, again, is a fish pond. This is a sling bag, bright orange, so you can easily tell somebody, go get the orange bag. And this thing has watertight zippers. If you wear a sling, this is a sling bag versus a backpack. You can operate it within your chest area, and it works just fine. They're a little harder to run with, but I'm not thinking about running too much when it comes to, you know, blizzards. But for other things, I'd recommend a backpack. But sling bags work great. Next thing, let's see. I had mentioned in my previous video the idea of a toe strap. This is a Snatch Strap. This is an ARB one. Generally, in a lot of conditions, almost all conditions, you'd prefer a Snatch Strap, which actually, these are elastic. They stretch out a little bit and basically store the energy of a car or a truck pulling another car until that energy can be released over a little bit larger time versus if you use a toe strap and you drive fast and, you know, the toe strap goes taut, what happens is that's kind of like hitting a wall. You can break car parts. It's really hard on the strap. They're not designed for that. These are. But also, if you think about the level of traction you might have, you're barely able to spin, you know, on the icy highway, and you're trying to pull somebody out, or you're trying to get pulled out. They're going to have to get some momentum going. And if they can't get that momentum going, you're not going anywhere. And the problem with toe straps is it releases all the energy at once, so you got like these one-shot bangs of trying to get pulled out. So get a good one. Get a Snatch Strap. I like this ARB recovery strap. How do you attach it? Got to have a way to do that. These are soft shackles. Soft shackles are actually a fairly solid way of attaching things. Believe it or not, it's just this kind of like rope with a knot at the end, and then you attach those just simply by sliding the ball end through the opening. So they can be used in many different areas on the car, although you should know what you're connecting it to, so you can just wrap it around, you can link them together, you can fit them into all sorts of different positions, whereas if you have, you know, big attachment points like this, you have to be able to attach it. Your attachment points have to fit the vehicle, and soft shackles are great. There's all kinds of good ones available, so know where they are and how they work. While I'm here, you need a tourniquet. Keep it close. You should be able to grab it with from the driver's seat, and know how to use it and know how to put it on yourself in case you go sliding off and smash your arm open in a window. Be able to put it on left-handed. Tourniquets are a good first choice now these days, especially in emergencies. Let's see. The flashlight, obviously you need one. I highly recommend instead a good solid headlamp, and the reason is sometimes you can't hang on to this if you're working. You know, you don't want to waste one of your hands with a flashlight, and you don't want to stick it in your mouth or, you know, try changing a tire or try working on a car with this under your armpit. You need a headlamp, and obviously you can always use it as a flashlight if you need to. And I'd get a pretty good one. You don't want to skimp out here. Black Diamond has quite a few. I don't need a lot of features. This is a through night here. Runs on an 18650 rechargeable battery. I can double it up with a pair of CR123s if I need to, which you also want to have. And it's a pretty solid light. It's a nice big light. I'll be doing a review on this. I've been testing it for a while. I love this thing. So definitely get a good headlamp. I don't think you can have too many lights. You just have to have working lights. Another light would be an area light. In this case, this is an O-light MCO bulb just inside the car. And the reason is that a lot of times you want a little bit of light, but you don't want to be burning your flashlight. Some of these don't go down very low, or they're too directional. And sometimes, you know, if you're working in a small area in your car on something, or, you know, whatever it is, all you need is a little bit of light. And so having something like this is great. You can also use your work lights, shop lights. I like these because they have magnets on them. I can attach them to the frame of my car and point them in different directions, you know, or on the bed of my truck or whatever, or use them as signal lights. And of course, these have the ability to charge something, so you want to have redundancy there. This is a handheld GPS. Sometimes you don't get cell. This can have a lot to do with both knowing where you are, but also what's around, especially if you have the maps loaded on these. And I've got Onyx maps loaded for the places I go, so I know the roads, the back roads, the towns, etc., whether or not they're loaded on my phone. Another thing, I mentioned a shovel. This is the one that I showed before. It's that Glock shovel. It doesn't have a big area, and a lot of times you're moving snow and you're kind of beating on things. So what I recommend at a minimum is getting yourself you know, a shovel like that. You can see it's twice or more the ability to move the snow, and getting into a longer handle just saves your back, especially if you're working under a car, you know, shoveling for quite a while, which sometimes it's surprising how much snow is actually built up. These do come apart. There are lots of options, so you can fit them in smaller areas, but you got to be able to access it. This is something I'm not too concerned about having in my trunk or somewhere further away, because you don't use it inside the car. It's an outside the car thing, so some stuff you got to have inside, definitely. Other stuff can be outside. Another thing I recommend highly is a good pry bar. This can be getting into another car, out of a car, straightening things out, you know, bent bumpers or whatever, although a lot of those are styrofoam. You can just bust them off with a hammer or your pry bar. If you want to take it even more serious, you can get something like this. This is a Halligan tool made by Council Tool. And this is a pretty serious tool for busting into and out of stuff. It's the classic design. It does weigh a lot. This is actually a shorter one. This is the shortest one that they make. And I got this specifically for the vehicle. And I did wrap this with paracord. Not so I have paracord in case I need it. But this thing is just, it's iron. It's so cold in the winter. But you do need to store it so it doesn't go rolling around in your car when you're, you know, rolling down the embankment. But think of a serious pry bar. You don't need all kinds of other tools, you know, to get out of your car. Just one that works. Battery starters. I had mentioned jumper cables in the previous video. You definitely always want jumper cables, but definitely have, you know, for the next level, some sort of an extra starter for your battery or somebody else's battery. A lot of times in the snow, you can't get cars together. You might not even be able to move your car or someone else's. This allows you to do it on your own. Plus, it doesn't, you know, have as great a risk of messing up your car's computers by, you know, a voltage spike from somebody else's car or truck if they're starting. So definitely get something like this. I'm actually working on using Milwaukee pack-outs for various stuff. So I can easily slap them together and make the kits to go for depending on what I'm into. Another thing is an inverter. This one I can hook up with my jumper cables to the battery, or I can plug it in. A lot of times you don't want to kill your car battery. That's, you know, that's a pretty serious thing. But also there might be other reasons that you need better power out. So you want options. Another battery boost here. This Norco's pretty good. This is a GB40. Get a good one for your vehicle. If you got a big V8, you're going to need enough juice to turn the vehicle over, and the little ones may not work. Another thing you might want is some foam, and this is just a sleeping pad. You want an insulation. There's several different options for stuff like this. This is a Z-Fold here by Thermarest. You can also get material like this. It's a big spool of it here. And the reason that you want something like that is an insulative layer under you or next to you, or use it as a blanket if you have to. But sometimes you're leaning against cold sides of a vehicle. You're stuck for a long time, and you want to be able to insulate yourself because conduction is a good way to lose a lot of energy. So I'm also thinking just repurpose some of your other stuff, whether it's your hunting stuff, your backpacking, camping stuff, whatever it is. Next thing, have extra batteries of various sizes. I've got and these are all lithiums. They work better in cold weather, but I've got my AA's, my AAA's, and my CR123s, to operate different things, whether it's a GPS or flashlights, etc. Or my carbon monoxide detector. This particular thing here from Klein actually monitors levels of carbon monoxide. And that's, a good way to get in trouble sitting in a car, especially if the tailpipe's clogged or you've got kind of a bubble around you, or even worse, you're in a big line of traffic and somebody's got a great big old exhaust pipe stuck in, next to your car, and you're trying desperately to stay alive and they're pumping exhaust into your car. Anyway, another thing you can do, as far as ventilation and stuff, is to get some pipe. This is pipe insulation, and you cut it for the length of your windows. And then most cars have auto or have electric windows go up and down. You don't want to have to keep turning on your ignition, which fires up everything in the car, just to move your window up or down just a little bit. So first thing you do after you realize you're going to have to stop is you drop the window, one or more windows, the inch or two, and then wedge this in there to seal it. Not a perfect seal, but you can adjust the seal by bending it or even taking it out to get ventilation in and out of the car at whatever level you want without having to turn on the ignition and roll the windows up or down. You want enough resistance here so this stays in place, and obviously if there's a massive amount of wind or something, then you'll end up with a problem. But that's when you could turn on the car and roll the window up. But otherwise, this is a really good way. Because a lot of times, and I've heard of this, is people are getting tired, they turn the ignition, they drop the window, they lay back down, and pretty soon their battery's dead. And the reason it's dead is because they left their ignition on in order to turn the window, or move the window, and they forgot to turn it back off. You just want to have your key out of the car's ignition completely. You don't want to mess around with that. So get some of this stuff. It's really cheap. I get the smallest diameter I can because it's pretty solid stuff. You want closed cell so it doesn't absorb any water. Wedge it in. Good to go. And then just, cut it or whatever. The next thing would be rope. Now, why would you need rope? Obviously, if you're dealing with a situation that's in a blizzard, you might not want to go very far, to do your business or whatever, without a way right back to the car. Sometimes it's super slippery. Sometimes you go down an embankment. Sometimes you're using it to signal. Sometimes you're connecting things like, to a tree. But it's important to remember that it's possible to get lost within a few feet, of a vehicle, to get disoriented, to get stuck. And so rope helps. You can also use it for first aid. You can use it for a lot of different uses, but this is the bare minimum. This is polypropylene rope. You can get this for like $10, $15 at a hardware store. I don't know what this is, 30 feet or something, 50 feet. And this stuff doesn't get damaged at all by water or ice or anything else. It's designed for boats. It's super light, highly visible. This would be a good start. If you want to upgrade your rope, here you go. You can actually use some small diameter climbing rope. This allows you also, to get off bridges, embankments, things like that. You don't want to tow cars with it, but it probably could. And you definitely don't want to have a, start into some kind of a rappelling or climbing adventure if you don't know what you're doing just because you have a piece of rope and you watched a movie. But it's definitely good to have real rope that can support human weight. The next thing, I had mentioned tarps for you know, makeshift clothing or whatever, well, just get some good clothing. And here's a couple of things. One, go get a large, some kind of a shell, a parka shell. Make sure it has a hood. Gore-Tex is fine if you want, but you want a big shell. It doesn't matter if it's too big, but this breaks the wind. This actually allows you to, you know, pile on whatever underneath, or use it as, you know, you can wrap it around somebody who's much smaller. It doesn't have to be expensive, but you just, it stays in the car. Pull it out. The brighter the color, the better. Another thing is to have down vests. Down vests, this stuff like this gets incredibly small, super light, but it protects or it insulates your core. Your core is where you lose a lot of heat. That's why vests are so important. So pick up a down vest, or 2 or 3. These are better if they're a little bit on the snug side as far as staying warm, and they make a huge difference. You can wear them under, you can wear them over, whatever, which also leads to a couple of other things you should have. One, good hats for everybody, even an extra hat. That's probably the single best thing. I always found it funny in that Apollo 13 movie where they're freezing up in the lunar module, you know, disasters unfolding, and they have hats. They have leather skull caps. They've got all kinds of things, but instead they are not wearing them, and they're losing energy right out of their head. Get a good one. I like the Gore Windstopper. Does make a bit of difference. A little harder to hear through them, but if you're in high wind situations, which often blizzards are, definitely one of those for everybody. Buffs are another thing. This is basically just a tube of material. This one's more of a summer buff, fishing buff. You know, not super cold weather, but they do make really cold weather buffs like this guy. It's huge. You lose a ton of heat out of your neck. Your neck is actually doesn't have a lot of fat on it. It's got all kinds of tubes running up and down. Makes a big difference. Plus you can pull this up over your head, or you could use it for a lot of other things, even a tourniquet. Repurpose your hunting stuff, little skull caps. You can wear even under your hat. You know, there's nothing wrong with wearing 2 hats. And sometimes if people have a, you know, I've got a large head, I wear this, but somebody else might not. They want to borrow it, then they put a hat on and then put the hat over the hat, and then it fits better. Also a good set of gloves. I had pointed out using, maybe even repurposing some of your other gloves. Also have some real serious ones. I like gauntlet gloves, so I can pull them up higher, especially working in deeper snow. By the way, if you see these straps and you don't know what they are, you just put them around your wrist, slide that up, and then you don't lose your glove. That's what those are for. Just pull those up and then slip it on. And then that makes it a whole lot easier to work in deeper snow without getting it inside. You know, and then you snap that down and you're sealed. Don't have to be expensive. They just have to be quality enough that it'll work for you. And then fabricate whatever else out of your tarp. I went over boots before. Definitely have those in your car with extra socks. You can also duct tape up your feet if you had to, but I want you to have options there. And then finally, you know, a sleeping bag. Have one ready to go within reach. I like the big down sleeping bags. Make a huge difference. And with that, please add your comments, etc. down below. But that should get you started. Be safe out there. Doc out.